What's going on, YouTube? My name is Mr. Crippled, and today I'm going to be bringing you why I think Chaac sucks as a character. Now, before I get into the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to keep up with any future content that I'm going to be making in the future, I'll be leaving a link to my Discord and my Twitch in the description below. Now, Chaac is a very interesting character. To be 100% honest with you, back in Smite 1, he is still one of the easiest guys to pick up, one of the easiest warriors to just pick up and play. And he comes with a lot of pros, but equally or more cons to play as him, and I want to go ahead and go over that. So before I really start hammering into this character, I want to go over his pros. Now, one, he has a very good he has decently low CDR. He also is, like I said, a very easy god to pick up. Probably the easiest god to pick up other than Bellona. If Bellona is the meathead for auto attack warriors, Chaac is the meathead for ability based warriors. He has pretty decent damage early. As you can see, his 1 does hit for 65, then 1115, then 160, and this is going to be your main ability to do damage with. This ability also does decent damage while also giving him decent sustain. And his 3 also has a slow and reduces attack speed while also healing you. So kind of early game, he counters people who are 100% reliant on their auto attacks. And like I said before, he does have, in my opinion, one of the best passes for a solo laner in the game. Every 5 auto attacks, your next ability not only doesn't cost any mana, but it has reduced cooldowns by 2 seconds, and that ability heals you for 20% of your intelligence scaling. So the passive is also really nice to have in an early game setting, especially if you're like trying to spam all of your abilities. Then you just got to hit the wave 5 times, and then you get your 1 back for free. So it's always really nice to have some type of mana sustain. I also do think he has one of the better team fight ultimates in the game. Does pretty decent damage, while also giving you damage mitigations while it's casting. It has a big silence for about 1.5 seconds, and it has a knockup, and knockups are the best form of CC in the game. Even though the knockup is kind of small, you can't beads a knockup, but they can beads the silence. But since the ultimate has such a huge radius around it, it can switch up some team fights and is a really good engager if the team is ready for you to ult. Plus, since it does so much damage, the squishies are going to be, especially the mages, are going to be very hard pressed to deal with this ultimate. Now, like I said, he does have equally bad cons, in my opinion, more cons than pros. First and foremost is his damage scaling. Now, for me, when it comes to a solo laner, the whole point of a solo is to not only be decently tanky, but also have a decent amount of damage to be a threat or a diver on the back team's enemy line. Somebody who's basically the frontliner, not the support, like they're just being tanky to protect the team. The job of a solo is to be just tanky enough to be a threat and just do enough damage to where the squishies have to be worried about them. Late game, his damage scaling is really not all that to cry home about. I mean, 80% damage scaling with strength and intelligence seems like a lot, but at the end of the day, he's not scary enough damage-wise for the squishies to really be mindful of him. And while he does have decent sustain with his 3 and the passive, because in most games you're going to be dealing with a Divine Ruin or some form of anti-heal, that way they can deal with you, his tankiness is kind of subpar since he relies so heavily on his built-in sustain. And so to be able to make up for that, he has to either sacrifice his tankiness to make sure he does more damage, which is kind of scary for a solo laner, or he has to sacrifice his damage to be more tanky and be in the front line. And while in most cases that will be more beneficial to just be tankier and just be harassing, the problem is that his team fighting presence is very, very low. The 2 biggest things that he has for teams fights is throwing down his 1 and then activating his 3. If you don't know what it does, the 1, once it's down on the ground, will buff his 2 and his 3. If it's on the ground, his 2 becomes a teleport. If his 1's on the ground and he activates it, his 3 basically adds his little rain dance to that area in a pretty wide AoE that has like a 25% slow and a 20% attack speed slow, which is good on paper, but in reality, it's very easy to just walk out of. And so without the ultimate, he kind of just becomes, he's just there. Even though his CDR is fairly decently low, showing, a 16-second cooldown with no CDR, the 2 having a 6-second cooldown, which is nice, and then the 1 only having 10 seconds. While it's nice to have the low CDR, because his autos don't really hit as hard, in most cases you're not really going to be building for his autos. Once his abilities are down, he's not a threat, and they don't do enough damage in a combo succession for it to really even matter. So once he throws his abilities and he doesn't have ult, the entire enemy team can kind of just ignore him because his damage really isn't even that high. And despite him being easy to use, knowing when to use his utility and when to place it down for most new people is very difficult. Because if you use your 1 and then your 3 to slow the entire enemy team, well, 1, they can just walk right out of it, and 2, you use your hyper engage. If you use your 1 and then your 2 to engage, well, then you use the utility on your 3 to slow the entire enemy team. And he's very, very reliant on that ult, and he's really just much of an ult bot. The other thing I want to talk about with him, a really big con in my opinion, is that comparatively to the other warriors, he just lacks. If you really want to slow or to bully the backline with autos, Bellona is definitely the better pick. Her slow is 20% slow, and even though it's not as big, instead of just slowing the attack speed, she just completely disarms you, so you can't attack her back. If you want a really good team fighting ult, well, Hades, or even if you want to stay within the warriors, Odin. Odin has this big cage where it not only slows you, but it completely gets rid of your ability to heal, and they have to waste time trying to break the shield. And on top of that, their attack speed is also still slowed, and this ult is on a lower cooldown. So if you want a better team fighting ultimate and just be a better harasser with decent engage and more CC, Odin's better. If you're looking for somebody that's tanky and does a lot of damage still, Mordred is in the game. He's like King Arthur, and he's very easy to pick up. And plus, since because he's a tank, his 1 hits harder for being tanky, so he naturally hits you harder for building him how you're supposed to build. Plus, he also has built-in sustain, and even though it's not as crazy as Chaac's, since late game you're not really going to be able to be reliant on it, it doesn't really matter. He can just out-tank Chaac and has a better soloing team fight ult and a better single target ult, since he has 2. And then if you want to get out of if you want to just get out of warriors in general, well, Ares has this chain. He gets more damage for being tanky, so you literally don't have to build any damaging items, and he'll do more damage than Chaac. Plus the utility, since he has a cripple, he has 2 ways to make sure you bees with the cripple and the ultimate. Hades, if you watched me play before, if you heard of me before, Hades is a bully. He does a lot of damage and is already tanky while only building damage items. If you want to troll, well, Ymir also is a pretty decent solo laner right now, since he hits incredibly hard and he has better CC and probably the hardest hitting team ultimate in the game. So, and then, you still have like your damage troll picks like Anubis, Fenrir, Susanoo. There's just a lot of people who can do what he does just better. And the only real reason to pick up Chaac is just his ease of use and his sustain. And the only way for Chaac to really maintain relevance is to constantly be ahead of the enemy solo laner. But comparatively speaking, he doesn't outclear anybody. He doesn't do much more damage, and his sustain, the only thing he can rely on is his sustain, but most people can out DPS him even during his heal. So, to me, other than ease of use, there's really not much point to play Chaac, especially if you're going to be playing Conquest. Arena and obviously in future game modes, he's going to be a lot more relevant since it's going to be more steamroll. But for those long, drug-out games, Chaac to me, is kind of just irrelevant. But if you disagree with me, or if you have anything else to add, feel free to comment in the comment section below. And thank y'all for your time today, and y'all have a nice rest of your day.